1 și un sfert. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are continuing our conference today with the second panel, and the topic is security challenges for the Balkan region and the competition of great power. So before starting our panel today, I would like to say that the speakers in the previous panel made my introduction very easy, and especially Ambassador Celac, who mentioned and who gave us a definition of the Balkan region. And I would like to reiterate this definition because it's very important to set the stage of our discussion. So the term of Balkan Peninsula in the political sense was first used during the Napoleonic Wars at the beginning of 19th century, and during also the Turkish-Russian wars. And the idea was, from geographical point of view, a region that covered the Southeast Europe from Dinaric Alps towards the Black Sea. We have to, this geographical definition is not quite real, but it was implemented in the mindsets of the politicians during the time. During the Ottoman invasion, also the Romanian lands north of Danube were included in this definition. Lately, after 1990, the term of Western Balkans appeared. Western Balkans means those countries that were not engaged in European Union integration or NATO integration. What is important to say is that in 2016, a researcher, Marija Ninkalik, proposed approaching the term Southeastern Europe in the historical context. So, when we are referring to the Balkan Peninsula and especially the security challenges and competitions, we have to keep in mind that the geopolitical configurations linking together the Western Christian, Eastern Orthodox, and Islamic worlds. Historically, the interaction of great powers in the Balkans has shaped the instability or the stability of other regions like Northeast Mediterranean region. The region is now characterized by high geopolitical risk. Security risks include many bilateral disputes, lasting enmities from the wars since 1990, and the threat of Islamic fundamentalism. In addition, and adding to tensions, the European Union faces geopolitical competition in the region from China, Russia, and Turkey. Factors that predispose the region to political risk and instability, including ethnic fragmentation, low public trust in the government, a history of conflicts, high unemployment, access to small arms, risk of terrorism, international tensions, human rights abuses, the existence of group grievances, and large number of refugees and displaced persons. From geopolitical point of view, I would like to mention these ideas, some criteria. On political, social, and economic criteria, we have members of the European Union, like Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Romania, and Slovenia. And on military criteria, we have member territories of NATO, like Albania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Romania, Slovenia, and Turkey. And also we have candidates from EU membership, like Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey, Albania and North Macedonia, potential candidates for EU, like Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Kosovo, and countries involved in the Partnership for Peace programs, like Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Serbia. During our panel, we tried to answer following questions. What are the global powers involved in the Balkans, and what are their strategic interests? What security challenges, risk, and threat do the countries in the Balkans face? What can configurations of great power interaction between European Union, Russia, and Turkey tell us about the Balkans today? And how do we see NATO and EU interest in enlargement in Western Balkans? We try to answer these questions with our panelists. General Vincenzo Camporini, former Chief of Defense Staff from Italy via VTC. Hello, sir.
Good morning, everybody.
We don't hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There is an echo, but I can hear you. Good morning, everybody.
Introduce Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, Pershing Chair of Strategic Studies, Center for European Policy Analysis, and former Commander of United States Army Europe, also via VTC. Hello, sir.
Good morning, and thanks for the privilege to participate.
Again. Lieutenant General Young Professor National Intelligence Academy and visiting professor at West University of Timișoara, and also it was the deputy director for Romanian intelligence service. Dan Bozilov, founder and president of the Sofia Security Forum from Bulgaria. Hello, sir.
Thank you, moderators. Great pleasure to participate in this conference. Greetings from Sofia.
Welcome. 90 minutes or so, we'll try to discuss about these topics. I will ask our panelists to address not more than 10-12 minutes in order to have the chance for further discussions and questions. I will give the floor to General Vincenzo Camporini, and let's try to define the global powers involved in the Balkans and their strategic interest, and which are the security challenges in this region.
History shows that many things happen in the Balkans, and the influence of what's happening in the Balkans is worldwide. Of course, there is a game going on, because there are conflicting interests and there are ambitions which in a way are incompatible between each other. Of course, my main reference today is with Turkey. Turkey has some views on the desired outcome of the political game, which may seem not in line with what we expect in our countries. Of course, one of the main points is that Europe does not have really a comprehensive and unique view on what's going on in the whole of the world and in the Balkans as well. For sure, the attitude of Germany and the attitude of France, the attitude of Italy is do not coincide, and this makes things quite difficult to have a dialogue with a single country which has a very clear idea on the scopes. Mr. Erdogan is absolutely very clear. No no way to misunderstand him. He wants to extend the influence of Turkey. He wants to become, I hate to use the word, the new Ottoman Empire, but for sure he wants to have a much more influence in the region, kind of a hegemonic view which he would like to implement. And the Balkans, not only the Balkans, but the Balkans are for sure one of the scopes he's looking at. Not the only one. He has also Syria. He has also Libya. He has also some saying in the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. But in the Balkans, for sure, there is a very evident attitude to amplify the influence of Turkey. The last move I can perceive is the decision taken to take possession, let's say so, of the port of Valona in Vlore in Albania, which is becoming one of the main posts for the Turkish forces in the Adriatic Sea. And the fact that Erdogan wants to have a say in what's going on in the Adriatic Sea, should be looked very carefully by our governments. It means that the intention of Erdogan are not limited to very limited borders on his borders. For sure, he has the ambition to become the master, the one who has the last saying in all the area. In this fight, he is helped by others, because the influence of the Islamic movements in the area is very strong. We have Saudi Arabia, which is investing a lot of money for humanitarian reasons, but we know that sometimes humanitarian reasons go hand in hand with the political scopes. Therefore, we have something going on in the area, and we do not have a single and univocal policy by all the others which I have already mentioned. The only thing which is common to all the Western participants is a desire to maintain stability in the region. The fact that in Kosovo we still have almost 5,000 troops in order to control that no violence is revamping is very clear. Let me remember that we entered Kosovo in 1999, so 21 years have gone by, and we still have 5,000 troops in an area which is as large as the small Italian region of Umbria. So this shows that we have this awareness that unless we are present, things may go wrong. But beyond this desire of stability, I do not perceive a definite policy shared by all the Western countries. And this is a very positive situation for Erdogan and the Turkish policy. I believe that we should be very careful in watching what's going on, in watching the moves of Turkey. And please do not tell me that, well, Turkey is not in a good shape, they are almost broke, they cannot sustain all the efforts. I've heard these considerations several times, but the ones which apparently were not in a condition to sustain an effort eventually had the upper hand. Therefore, we should be extremely careful in what's in the decision-making process in Turkey, and we should try to negotiate with a clear idea of what we want. Unfortunately, the present situation with this pandemic has concentrated all the political effort in our countries to the fighting of the pandemic, to internal issues, to our economic fragile situations, and not much interest is now shown by our governments, my government for sure, for international politics. This puts us in a very weak position, and as far as I can do, I try to foster the interest on the international business beyond who will be the next president in the US or beyond the Brexit issue, because things happen regardless the fact that we look at them or not. They happen, and eventually we wake up in a different world, which maybe is not the one we like. Thank you.
A great player in the region, which is Turkey, the Turkey influence, and I'm very happy you mentioned the connection that Turkey has in the region, not only with the Balkans, but also with Syria, Libya, and now we have the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. Also, you mentioned that now we are focusing much more on internal issues because of the pandemic, and we sometimes forget about the security risks in the region. It's very good, your question, what we have to do. Yes, we have to think more thoroughly what we have to do with this security risk. Thank you, General Camporini. I'll give the floor to General Hodges, and maybe hope General Hodges will mention some other key players in the Balkans. Sir, you have the floor.
So thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to the New Strategy Center, one of the best think tanks in all of Europe, for giving me the possibility to participate in this. So this is about great power competition, as you said at the very beginning. And I believe that great power competition actually can prevent great power conflict. If you compete in the diplomatic space and in the information space and in the economic space, as well as in the military space, you're conveying to adversaries and potential adversaries that this area is of interest. If you don't compete, if you don't invest, if you don't exercise in all of these different domains, then that tells a potential adversary, help yourself. We're not going to do anything about it. And we've seen the results of that in Syria and in various other places. Response after Crimea, and of course the Chinese see that we did nothing after they smashed Hong Kong, and so this just invites further aggression, and we know this, all of us, from our study of history. Now, the Black Sea region, of course, is that cauldron of competition. The Black Sea region is the place where I think the Kremlin has decided this is the most important place for them, because it gives them a platform into Syria, into the Eastern Mediterranean, and as General Camporini accurately says, into Libya as well. And so I think that the Russians will do everything they possibly can to strengthen their hold in the Black Sea region. The Balkans, the Balkan region, is the back door into the Black Sea region. And that's why the Kremlin invests so much effort into Serbia, into trying to, I think they believe that Montenegro was still competitive space. That's why they did everything they could to prevent North Macedonia from becoming a member of the alliance, because they want to expand their reach and their control over the Black Sea region. And that's why this panel today and this conference is so important, to talk about how do we compete in the Balkan region, because it is that back door. And I also want to echo General Camporini's emphasis on Turkey. Look, Turkey is a great ally. They've been an ally since 1952. I served 2 years in Izmir at NATO's Land Command. but they're a difficult ally. They are so easily offended, and I think the current administration in Ankara does have wide-ranging vision for Turkey's role in Europe and in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean. Having said that, it is a member of the alliance, and even though administrations change, the map will never change. And so I think it is to our interest that we repair the relationship between Turkey and NATO, Turkey and the EU, and especially Turkey and the United States. We need to have a stable, reliable ally in Turkey, but that means that Turkey needs to have confidence in the West. And so we've got to fix this relationship, refresh it. I would say it's time for USA-Turkey 2.0. I'm encouraged that Turkey has reached out to Ukraine and that they are cooperating much more extensively. And certainly we all are going to learn a lot from what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh, as General Camporini has suggested. I would think that we want to make sure that our Turkish allies are having a positive influence on the Azeris, that the Azeris do not overreach and go too far, which would then prompt the Kremlin to step in. And the last thing any of us wants are Russian peacekeepers sitting in Nagorno-Karabakh or anywhere in that region. So what does this have to do with the Balkans? Because that corridor of Azerbaijan and Georgia is the only corridor that connects Eurasia and Europe that does not go through Russia and does not go through Iran. So it's in the interest of everybody in the Black Sea region and the Balkan region that we keep this Georgia-Azerbaijan corridor free of Russian peacekeepers. So getting to a negotiated settlement there will actually benefit the Balkan region, and certainly Romania would benefit when we can have this corridor. Now, as part of this construct of great power competition, I believe that the United States has a critical role to play. And while the current U.S. administration causes many of us to scratch our head and worry about how it looks at Europe and how it looks at the alliance, I am at least encouraged that this administration has done a lot to demonstrate leadership in trying to resolve the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. For sure, it's going to take American participation working with the European Union, not against the European Union and not parallel to the European Union, but with the European Union to help bring about a better stability here. Now, I'm glad that General Camporini mentioned the KFOR, the Kosovo Force. I think we have 28 nations now that contribute, and I believe that the number of actual troops that are there today is probably down to about 3,600 or so. The key is that 28 nations continue to invest in KFOR. The United States provides about 600 soldiers. Italy continues to provide leadership. Major General Risi is there now, one of the best Italian officers I've ever met. So that Italy puts one of its best officers in charge of the KFOR mission, I think is a powerful signal of how important this is. But I was told by the Albanian chief of defense and the Serbian army chief a few years ago, please do not pull KFOR out. It is the only anchor of stability in the region. And I think that's a powerful signal when both sides ask that the KFOR remain on duty there. And when you think about it, whether it's 3.5 or 5,000, that is nothing in terms of investment. That is such a small number. I mean, there's that many people in a typical traffic jam in Rome, less than 5,000 people. So it's a small investment by the nations, but to demonstrate commitment to stability and security in Europe. And I'm glad that the alliance and the recent defense ministerials continues to endorse the KFOR mission. The European Union obviously has a critical role, particularly with economic development. The EU has to keep the door open, and not just in a token way, but in a meaningful way for countries in the Western Balkans, not just Serbia, but all of them. I think Albania and North Macedonia are about to begin their process here in the next weeks. This is important because at the end of the day, people have to have confidence, have to see an economic future. for young people to want to stay home, to stay and work in their own country. If they don't see that, then they head west. They head to Germany, they head to UK, or they head elsewhere looking for better opportunities. And I think stability and security there in the Balkans depends just as much on economic development and private investment as anything else. And whether we're talking about factories, infrastructure, other opportunities in agriculture, this kind of investment, I think, is critical. Now, of course, Romania sits right in the middle of all of this. Romania, I believe, is the center of gravity for NATO, for the Black Sea region. It sits between Ukraine, Hungary, Moldova, Bulgaria, and Serbia. So Romania has a critical role, not just in countering Russian influence in the Black Sea region, but also in the Western Balkans. And I had the chance to speak with President Vučić last year, and he talked about how important the relationship was with Romania, as well as with Hungary. And I think this is a place where Romania can also help. We need Hungary to be more cooperative with Ukraine, and Hungary continues to block NATO's discussions with Ukraine, and I think Romania perhaps could play a role here. It's important to keep in mind, my friend Jelena Milic, who's one of the not only is she one of the bravest people I know, she's also one of the smartest. And she keeps reminding me, and I agree, that Serbia today is not the Serbia of 1999. I mean, it's been more than 20 years. And I believe that we've got to help Serbia get past this, its memory of NATO bombing and the relationship it has with the Kremlin. We have to offer some other opportunities. The Russians are not going to just give up and walk away. They've recently opened an office inside the Serbian Ministry of Defense. The Chinese have recently sold weapons there. This is Serbia's option. It's every sovereign nation's right to get their weapons from where they want. Now, we've got to compete there. We have to offer some other options there. And when you think about it, in infrastructure, the Danube River, which is so important to Romania and Bulgaria and to NATO as a logistics artery, as well as a commercial artery, it has to pass through Serbia. So if for no other reason, we need Serbia to be stable, sovereign, and free of Kremlin influence. Let me close with this. It is in the interest of all of us that we compete effectively with the Kremlin in the Black Sea region. And that includes competing effectively, not fighting, competing in the diplomatic space, information space, and the economic space, as well as through security cooperation. Thank you very much.
General, as usual, you brought up a lot of new ideas and debatable points of view. I will start with a very interesting idea you brought up. You mentioned that the great competition in the region prevents the conflict, which is very interesting. I will have a question for you at the end, and the question is, do you think that this presence and competition in the region will establish the scenario, the scene for a further cooperation? Because already we see that each major power in the region have their own interest, and they established, let's say, like a bubble to act. In the future, and this question is for the end, do you think that this competition will end up in a cooperation to stabilize the region? Very, very good ideas. You already mentioned the great powers in the region, Russia, and the connection between the Black Sea and the Balkan region is very important. Also, the corridor from Azerbaijan towards the Central Europe, and not only. Turkey, yes, we have to discuss about Turkey. It's becoming a difficult NATO ally, a difficult regional partner. We have to engage and to discuss more. I'm very glad you mentioned the United States, and also you mentioned something which is very important these days. I mean that doesn't matter the elections, the geopolitical map will remain the same. European Union and the economic investments, we know, and already in the previous panel it was mentioned that European Union is the biggest investor in the Western Balkans and the Balkans generally. You mentioned K4, and this is another issue I want to bring up. You mentioned the presence in K4 and U4 in Bosnia and Herzegovina. More than 20 years military presence bringing stability in the region. But only stability, what else we have to see in this continuous military presence in the region? The importance of Serbia, of the Danube River, a great point, sir. I appreciate very much for all these inputs. And for sure, you opened the question box for you at the end. Thank you very much. I will now ask General Kolda to bring his ideas on this topic. Thank you, sir.
Hello, everybody. It's difficult to have a speech after such a prestigious speaker as General Ben Hodges is, and I say hello to him and to all our friends which are participants. First of all, I want to express my appreciation for the organizers who, under such a complex circumstances, succeed to organize and to keep high on the agenda a very relevant subject in the region, showing not only the ambitions of Timișoara University, but also the interest of Romania for this very important region. And thank you for that. It's not easy. It's easy to stop under such complex circumstances to organize this, but I'm glad that they succeed to make it. And that's very important, I think. Always discussing about the region, the Western Balkans, I am confronted with mixed feelings, because you don't know how much to be happy for the progress was done, or how much to be sad for what we should do more and better. And in this respect, I think over the years we witnessed the evolution of the situation in Western Balkan, but during the last couple of years, we've heard more than often that the Western Balkans are at the risk of becoming, or have become already, a geostrategic chessboard for external relevant strategic actors. In my opinion, are several factors which influence this. And first, and a very easy one, it's from the geography point of view. I mean, the landscape from this perspective is very simple. I mean, Balkanic Peninsula is a part of European continent, and from this perspective, they are already Europeans. And it's the only depends on us, Euro-Atlantic side, let's say, how to make it, to transform this geography in a reality. Second, the historical point of view, things are a little bit more complicated. The Western Balkans are uniquely composed of a mixture of nations and ethnicities that overlap with territorial borders. This mixture not only complicates states' cohesion, but also raises questions about the durability of peace. And that's very important. The third aspect, which was mentioned somehow by General Hodges, the overall balance of power in the region, it's also a very complex one. I mean, the Western Balkans are still only partially integrated into the Western security and economic structures. I mean, look at NATO, which carried out the last enlargement with the accession of North Macedonia this year. But I don't know how much Russia successfully encouraged Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina not to pursue similar demarches, similar ambitions. Look to the overall decline of democratic standards in the region over the past decade, which has slowed the EU integration, ceding the short-term initiative to China and its growing economic influence. The fourth dimension, which I want to be concentrated and to underline, is about competition of relevant global actors in the region, meaning the influence mainly of Russia and China, but also more limited influence of Turkey and Gulf states, as well as the role of European Union, NATO, and the US policies. I mean, strategically, we have talking about NATO-Russia competition, EU-China competition. In fact, this dynamic EU-China EU-China competition, it's more dynamic than the static ones, NATO-Russia competition. I definitely hope that we will not speak about the very sensitive matters in the coming years about the competition between USA and the European Union in the region, because we witness a lot of interesting developments in this regard. And we hopefully remain only in NATO, Russia, and EU-China. Anyway, which are the main security challenges? In my opinion, two dimensions really count, strategically speaking. One dimension is about security integration in the frame of NATO-Russia competition, and economic integration from the frame of EU-China competition. These major dimensions really count for the region. I mean, security integration, speaking about first dimension, is, as we all know, a precondition for democratic transition and economic integration. Not only military reform, but security reform, it's also extremely important for these countries. I mean, we can see many similarities with the Romanian lessons, and we can discuss with them and share with them not only how we did it well, but also our mistakes to try to avoid all of this. And I think this is important. I mean, the significance of NATO integration under such circumstances cannot be underestimated. Looking to the region and how the complex is the situation, the NATO did a very important steps. 3 countries are already part of NATO. Security reform required, as required by alliance succession, is essential. I mean, security services looking to the situation in West Balkans, problem with counter-terrorism, organized crime, corruption, and many other things, security service reform are crucial in following steps towards democratic values. Conclusion about this big dimension about security integration. NATO enlargement consolidates peace among the countries that are now members of alliance. As some countries remain outside NATO, there is also unsolved security problem, and this will remain on the agenda. Another big problem, another conclusion, is the accession of North Macedonia this year marks the possible end of the 2-decade-long NATO enlargement process. We don't know if they will be able to continue or not, but NATO has reached a point where it is unlikely to expand further. In fact, that requires permanent international peacekeeping in the hotspots of Bosnia and Kosovo. That's very important. The second dimension, which I was interested to speak, it was about economic integration in the frame of EU-China competition. I mean, despite the deadlock of security integration, as we have mentioned, the decline in democratic standards throughout the region since 2008 has slowed its integration into EU. The remaining non-EU countries in the region are stuck in transition to democracy. That's the biggest problem. Some countries have taken authoritarian turn and experience a decline in civil liberties. There is a slow pace of progress in broader economic and judicial reform. Domestic problems are even more pronounced in the non-EU states, not least in terms of corruption and organized crime. Even though in these complex circumstances, EU reinforced his commitments and try in the last year really to change the situation, making huge steps towards this related with this area. I mean, first of all, it's was declared openly that the EU's geostrategic interest for the region, which is important too. But as a fact, just to say a few of them, February 2020, a new enlargement methodology. March 2020, start of the accession negotiation with Albania and North Macedonia. April 2020, EU financial support package of over 3.3 billion euro to tackle coronavirus-related needs and post-pandemic socio-economic recovery. May 2020, a virtual EU Western Balkans summit. October 2020, the Commission proposed an economic and investment plan. This is a very clear fact that European Union understand the situation there, understand the competition with China and other actors, and really try hard to keep close the ongoing integration process. COVID, of course, changed situation in the region. As we can see, as a conclusion, Russia and China really try hard, based on this COVID crisis, to conquer our hearts and minds, trying to persuade people with this diplomacy of COVID. They, as we know, states like Russia and China are very instrumental in doing things rather than speak about things. That's for everybody who knows how they are acting. You can see that Russia used all kinds of means and methods in a very smart approach, we can say, to undermine the core value, Euro-Atlantic values in the region. I mean, make a huge effort. But in the same time, we should know that this weak periphery of Europe is not the biggest interest of Russia. As it was mentioned here, Russia is more interested in Ukraine, is more interested in the Black Sea, in other areas. But still, they keep an eye and try to do more and better in order to achieve part of their globes. Separately, China really did, with its potential and with this capacity of delivering money without preconditions like Europeans do, move fast and develop some very big projects in the area. And this is, we might be confronted with two major aspects. One is that they are undermining this precondition of European Union and oblige somehow the European Union and NATO to soften their conditions because they have other possibilities. Second is geopolitical. If you are involved in a critical infrastructure and China might own it sometime, that's very dangerous from the national security interest of these states, which might be, hopefully, sooner rather than later integrated. We might be optimistic that the region comparing with how it was done after the autumn of nations, after the fall of communist regime, is now in the other era. And but we cannot stop. European Union, Euro-Atlantic side, despite all the challenges they are confronted by other relevant actors, they should do more and better in a more innovative way to continue in this great competition, and it was mentioned, to attract them in
cooperation.
Euro-Atlantic side. One more, I will finish with this. It's very important the population, despite what their leaders are doing, are very favorable towards integration. And this cannot be ignored by anybody, by their regime and leaders, and cannot be ignored by relevant actors. But that's important to follow the subject, to keep it high on the agenda, and to do the necessary demarches at the diplomatic level, not only academic level and so on, in order to bring them in Europe as already they are, geographically speaking, and from historical point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. You gave us a very, very in-depth and view on the region. A lot of issues you raised up, and maybe the questions, for sure. You mentioned something which is very interesting, and I would like to discuss a little bit at the end. You mentioned here most of the population in Western Balkans is favorable to EU and maybe to NATO, except Serbia, that we see that. But I would like to remind you, sir, that in 2014, the High Commissioner Juncker made a statement that left the region empty for other players. He mentioned that there will not be no more EU expansion in the on his mandate. So in this period of time, made space for Russia and China to act. So this is very interesting, and what you mentioned here is very interesting. Change it. It's very important. Also, you mentioned that European Union is the largest investor here. I would like to sum up very, very quickly, because you gave us a lot of ideas, and maybe there will be questions on this. And I would like only to mention the competition, which is a very interesting topic. NATO, Russia, which is a static one. Maybe they challenge a little bit in the region, but much more important, European Union and China. In this way, I would like to discuss a little bit Russia is against NATO enlargement and EU enlargement in the region, because they want to, as you mentioned before, they want to preserve the region as a buffer zone and for this corridor towards Azerbaijan. China is favorable to European Union integration of the region. Do you think that maybe also Russia will be interested that this region will become a EU zone in order to have access to Central Europe and to Western through other means like trade, economy, and energy supply to Europe? Thank you, sir. Very good speech, very good points. Thank you very much. Now we go on, and I give the floor to Mr. Jordan Bozilov. Sir, do you hear us?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you once again for having me at this excellent conference. And I have to say that I feel very comfortable among fellow speakers who are respected generals. I myself worked for more than 20 years in the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense, so it's again a pleasure to participate in such a great panel. We are talking in this panel about security challenges and the great power competition, and we have to address both issues because some of the players here on the Balkans, they contribute to the stability and development of the region and individual countries, while others or others' behavior have negative impact. And I like very much what General Ben Hodges said, that we have to look at a broader picture and not separate Black Sea from Balkans, because otherwise we'll miss some important elements of our analysis. So if we speak about challenges in the Balkans, currently they are mainly of non-military nature. And they are linked to the economic development of individual countries and the region per se, energy dependency, organized crime, corruption, recently migration, huge problem for the Balkans. And the current situation with the pandemic crisis, this crisis but also create additional, let's say, challenges. And I'll stop on this at the end of my presentation. But what is sure, and what we observe even now, that the budgets for defense and security will be limited in the coming years. So this is again another challenge. Regarding the players on the Balkans, I mean, for decades the region is a field of political maneuvering of geopolitical players, and they are dominated by their interests or the idea to deter each other. Of course, different factors, different players, they try to achieve different interests. And I'll stop briefly on some of the players here, and I'll share my assessment on that. First is Russia. Russian interests in the region are twofold. They are political and economic, or political, military, and economic. Political interests, of course, are to stop the enlargement of NATO and not to allow the countries from the region to become part of the alliance. Russia obviously failed in this attempt. We have several countries which are already members of NATO, while others declare, for example, Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, although I don't see in the close future possibilities for them to join NATO, but still the idea of being part of Euro-Atlantic world is present here. Russia wants to keep countries in its sphere of interest. It is key for them, and of course to keep them into a Russian world as Russia perceived its world. And Russia is using all political means like propaganda, disinformation, political pressure, attempts to intervene into internal political processes. Very interesting approach is using by Russia. It's Russian Orthodox Church. Russian Orthodox Church is a part of Russian foreign policy leverages. Russia wants to present itself as a center and the protector of Slavic people and Orthodox Christianity. And it is visible, for example, a Russian church influenced Bulgarian Orthodox Church in the case with Macedonian Church. The second group of interests for Russia are the economic interests, mainly related to the resources, energy resources, of course, and the protection of Russian investments in different countries. Of course, the political and economic interests go hand in hand, and Russia tries to use economic leverages to gain political influence and vice versa. And what is important to be said when we speak about the role of Russia and the Balkans is that Russia does not represent a model for development of these countries. Even for Serbia, which is, let's say, closest ally or partner of Russia in the region. This means that the potential of Russia for realization of its interests in the region are limited. So Russia has to rely on corrupted politicians, people, for example, people with good feelings about Russia. But again, Russia is not a geopolitical alternative from the countries in the region. Having said that, I have to add that there are other players in the region which try to offer geopolitical alternatives to the countries. And of course, their activities are a challenge to NATO and to the European Union in the Balkans. One such player is China. China tries and implements a long-term approach towards the region. Its strategy goes around transforming its economic might into the political influence through the Belt and Road Initiative. To a big extent, China is still an unknown factor on the Balkans. China is currently creating its own leverages in the individual countries, or is using existing vulnerabilities. For example, corruption is one of the vulnerabilities which is used by Chinese companies. Also, Chinese companies are backed by the Chinese state and the state-controlled Exim Bank, which creates in many countries a temptation of taking loans to implement different projects, mainly infrastructure projects. And we have some negative examples like the construction of a highway in Montenegro, but we can discuss this later. Another player offering an alternative in the region is, I would say, radical Islam. I cannot link Islam to a particular country because there are many players here. It is, of course, Turkey, but it's some Gulf countries. What is important is that traditional Islam in the Balkans is a very moderate one. But after the dissolution of Yugoslavia and after the wars here in the Balkans, we see advancement of more radical forms of Islam. And this will create, of course, difficulties for the region in the future. We are already witnessing some forms of radicalization, terrorism, and it will create problems on bilateral basis for different countries. In order to cope with the risks and threats I mentioned just now, we have to look mainly at the role of EU and NATO in the Balkans. Countries need strong support on their ways towards membership in these two organizations, which means, of course, strengthening the democracies, establishment of strict rules, fighting corruption, and so on and so forth. If not, I'm afraid that Balkans may be transformed into a buffer zone, in a gray zone of instability and the playground of domination. So to avoid this negative scenarios, we have stronger commitment on the part of European Union and NATO for the region and for the countries in the region. And we see a lot of positive moves undertaken recently. For example, Germany created Berlin process. France last year adopted its own strategy on the Balkans. USA, okay, we do hope that USA will continue to play an important role in the Balkans, but it will depend very much, I think, on the results of today's elections. Very briefly about COVID, because COVID is not just a medical crisis, but it is security crisis. The economic, the pandemic will cause first deep recession on the Balkans. We received just recently data of the World Bank. For this year, economic activity in the region is projected to contract by 4.8%. Of course, this is caused mainly by disruption of supply chains, lockdown in different countries, but it will have negative impacts in most of the countries in the region. Only for this year, the data is that in Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Serbia, COVID-19 caused the unemployment of 300,000 people. Balkan countries already, put massive packages in different, mainly social and medical spheres. But due to the crisis and additional spendings, it is expected that between 4 to 10% of DGP will go to cover the deficit. So deficit will be increased to 10%. Brain drain, huge problem for the Balkans, as in these countries unemployment is the highest in the world among young people. And I'm glad that General Hodges mentioned this. Thousands, hundreds of thousands young people, people who can transform their countries, they simply leave, which is also a huge security threat. And EU and NATO should do more, should help in the development of the economies. I'll just mention that if we take foreign direct investments in this country, 82% of these investments are in houses or apartments. It's not investments in the real economy. And if mainly European Union and individual European countries are not doing enough, we'll see further declines in the economic development of these countries, and of course all related risks and challenges. I think that I'll stop here. Of course, there are a lot of interesting data which just came out from different analysis of the World Bank or European Union. We can discuss later, of course. But once again, thank you for inviting me at this very interesting conference.
You brought up very good things. Actually, you deepened the security challenges in the region. Also, you divided the Russian interest, and you made two pillars of Russian interest in the Balkans. One which is the political and military, and the other one the economic one. You developed on political and military to stop NATO enlargement and maintaining the political influence. That's great point. And also from the economic point of view, the investments also influencing the government, the political leaders. And you mentioned something which is very interesting, and I'm trying to challenge you a little bit. You mentioned that Russia is not an economic model. At the same time, we see European Union, even though it's the biggest investor in the region, we see European Union failing in deliver the right messages in the region. In this context, Serbia joined the former CIS economic forums. So this is a very questionable of the intentions, and maybe it's a message that European Union, even though it's investing, but also having very strict criteria. Also put the people, the countries from the region in a difficult situation not to agree with this criteria and to fulfill the criteria to join the European Union, then they are going to other economic formats. Very interesting thing, you brought up another player in the region I didn't mention previously, some Gulf states and radical Islam. We have seen, even though the Islam in the Balkans is a moderate one, but we've seen foreign fighters going to Syria and the Middle East and returning to Europe, which is a challenge. You brought up also some challenges like propaganda, soft power, promoting the Russian Orthodox Church and the Slavic linkage. Thank you very much, sir, and waiting for your comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we have almost 25 minutes for questions. If there is somebody in the audience that want to ask a question? No? So I have already some questions from the online. I would like to ask so the first question is, as we face the emergence of pandemic geopolitics, threatening the Western Balkans, long undermining by state capture and unfinished post-war reconciliation, how can allies work together to propose actionable solutions for the safe transition of this region during this crisis? Can the United States and European Union see eye to eye when it comes to this region? General Camporini. Do you hear us?
Okay, here I am. Here I am. Thank you for this question, and it's, I think, a crucial question, because either we have a common approach to solving the problems or to easing the situation in the area, or we are going nowhere. And here I see several problems, not only the different attitude between the Europeans and the Americans. They do not coincide perfectly, I would say, just to be kind. But in Europe itself, we have so many different views, which sometimes may become an obstacle, unsurmountable obstacle, to obtain a common policy towards the area. Just let me quote one issue. Kosovo has been established as a single state, but in the European Union we have 5 members who do not recognize it. So how can we establish a common policy towards an entity which is not recognized by some of the members? Do we have any perspective to overcome this difficulty? I don't think so. Because some of the countries which do not recognize Kosovo do not do it because they believe that they will suffer internal consequences from such a recognition. And of course I'm quoting Spain, but not only Spain. Therefore, no way to have on this specific issue in the Western Balkans a common view. So we start to have divergences. And having divergences is not conducive to a common action. We will have to work a lot on the issue. And I believe that a possible way out will emerge if and when Serbia and Kosovo will agree on the terms of the separation of the region, new country. Therefore, a lot of effort must be done in this field. I believe this is very crucial. Either we succeed in convincing both Belgrade and Pristina that it is in their own interest to agree on a way out, or we will not have a common European policy. and we will not have a Western European policy. So we will leave all the space to Russia, to China, to Turkey, and to all the others who believe that they have an interest in the area.
Very good point. I will continue with a question for General Hodges. You mentioned, sir, so we discussed during your after your speech about the idea you mentioned, great competition preventing the conflict. The next question, European Union officials regularly describe the Western Balkans as a crucial region for stability in Europe and express their concerns over the possibility of other foreign actors potentially filling the vacuum in the EU backyard. China has been steadily increasing its economic presence, and Russia has been manifesting its influence with military cooperation, economic instruments, and has been speculating its sharing religion and culture with other Slavic nations. What can West promise and deliver to this region and its leader that Russia and China cannot? And this is linked with what you mentioned about strategic competition preventing the conflict. Sir, you have the floor.
So the competition, of course, is important to demonstrate that we actually care about an area or a place. And once again, General Caparini has hit on the key part. I mean, if the EU says this is important, if European nations say it's important, then you have to demonstrate that it's important by putting resources there. And I'm not talking just military. I'm talking about economic investment, especially. Look, I don't like it, but I can understand why several countries in the region are willing to accept Chinese investment, because everybody wants improved seaports, airports, railroads, tunnels, infrastructure, whether we're talking about transportation infrastructure, or of course, everybody, including Germany here where I live, is looking for improved communications infrastructure. So if we don't compete, then we should not be surprised when nations turn to China and accept these debt traps in return for getting improved infrastructure. And it's in the interest of all of us that the Chinese Communist Party does not control infrastructure the way that they do actually, unfortunately, in much of Europe today. The divergences that General Camparini mentioned also, these are the seams that are exploited by the Kremlin and by Beijing. These seams, these cracks between us. And this is where I think the United States should play an important role, not necessarily having to lead, but to consistently be there. Unfortunately, I think American commitment in the Balkans has been sort of episodic. I mean, we get focused on it like we did during the Dayton Peace Accords and the I-4, and it became very important for us. And I think with great success working with all of our European allies here. But then we kind of walked away from it because we thought, okay, Cold War's over, Russia's going to be our partner, China, that seems years away. And so we turned our back on the Balkan region. And now, we're coming back. So I could understand our European friends, not just in the Balkans, but elsewhere, being a little bit skeptical. Okay, is this going to stick? Or do we have to hope that the next administration will also be interested? And so I think this would be an important place for the United States to demonstrate understanding and commitment. And that doesn't have to be a ton of money, but find ways to encourage businesses to want to invest there. I think, the investment that we're doing in Greece, for example, which is going to help Bulgaria at the port of Alexandroupoli. The United States sees that the seaport of Thessaloniki, which we had originally thought would be our critical port for Greece and the Aegean for U.S. military, it's under the control of a Greek-Russian oligarch. The port of Piraeus, the main seaport, of course, is almost 100% controlled by the Chinese. And so now the Americans have invested in Alexandroupoli, And actually, this will be a good thing for the region because you can download equipment at Alexandropoli, put it on a train, and it can get up to Burgas in Bulgaria faster than if you had it on a ship in the Aegean waiting to go up through the Turkish Straits into the Black Sea, and cheaper. So I think this is the kind of innovative thinking that American private investment should do with how we can contribute.
And it's very important, the investments, and also NATO or United States investments in the ports of debarkation, ports of entries, in order to create mobility, military mobility. Thank you very much for your. I have two other questions, and I will ask General Coldea. Sir, you mentioned during your speech the role of Romania as a possible mentor for NATO and European integration. Also, you mentioned that we can deliver to these countries our successes, also our failures in this field. Sir, I will ask you in this context. There is an existing cooperation format linking the Baltic with the Adriatic, the 3 Seas initiative, with an emphasis on economic cooperation. Romania initiated a regional cooperation format with a strategic reach, Bucharest 9, starting from the Baltic states to Bulgaria. Do you think it would be useful to have a strategic cooperation format that would unite NATO alliance, Balkan 9, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece, North Macedonia, Albania, Croatia? Will be B9 initiative that would aim for increased coherence among the Balkanic NATO countries?
That's a very important aspect of developing initiative and different multilateral formats of cooperation. But I see from my former capacity that it's very important to not overlap one initiative toward the other. Secondly, it's good to implement some steps and to see, based on the initial results, how to develop and how to enlarge different formats of cooperation. I think for the time being, we are okay with that, in the sense that they are defined, but let's see some results on all of this. In fact, this is the problem all to 3 Seas initiative and others, to deliver some results. Exactly for this problem of delaying to deliver results, they are exploited by more focused initiative made by Chinese in this critical infrastructure, and in some points by Russians. But they cannot compete with the large amount of sums delivered by European Union, delivered by these projects. But definitely they will undermine, as I've mentioned, they will undermine EU and NATO coherences with this kind of more concentrated and more focused initiative. And that's very important. What I would recommend is some formats of cooperation with police, like SECI, which Romania is leading, or other cooperation, informal formats of cooperation among services to help the countries in the region in some dimension, like security reforms, because we passed through this, like security sector reforms, and cooperation in the area of law enforcement agencies. I mean, we should remember that out of 1,000 foreign fighters, they are all from the Balkan areas, almost 500 are back. Stay in the region, it's already the backyard of European Union.
Right.
Look in the news, today news in Vienna, unfortunately. The guy, one of the guy, it was mentioned by media, it's Albanian origin. I mean, it's showing again and re-emphasize the importance of the region to secure this region, because these problems will be spread in Europe. It's backyard of European Union.
Right.
Come on. And if I will recommend, and I will finish with that, is to cooperate in a more practical way in the other areas and other formats, rather than this highly politically economic formats of cooperation.
Sir, because I know you
Please.
had also you held a very important position, and do you think that Romania can be a leading nation in the region, can be a model and also promoter of the values from NATO and European Union?
Not necessarily, but can do its very practical contribution and have a very good relation with the majority of countries of Western Balkans. And I don't play on this card of being a leading nation or something like that, but to play a role, and a major role, in some very important projects with a practical impact.
Thank you, sir. Very good
Thank you.
point. Thank you. Thank you very much. The last question for Mr. Bozilov. Serbia and Russia confirmed last month that legal proceedings have been launched between the two governments on the opening of a Russian Defense Ministry mission in Belgrade to further strengthen military cooperation between the two countries. But earlier in September, apparently without warning its host in Minsk, Serbia has frozen its participation in all joint military exercises for 6 months. Only days before, it was due to join the Russia and Belarus armies for the Slavic Brotherhood exercise in that country. How do you see Serbia positioning itself when trying to balance the relationship with the West while maintaining a strong link with Russia?
I would say that there is a big ambiguity in Serbia's position. From one side, Serbia is a candidate for EU membership, and from other side, it's tried to create closer relations, including military relations with Russia. I think that Serbia should understand that unless it leave this ambiguous position, sitting between two chairs, Serbia will never become a member of European Union. There are different issues here. From one side, I believe it's to a big extent related to the internal political situation in Serbia. I was at the last Belgrade Security Forum, and we had discussion about Serbia's orientation. It is very difficult for politicians to take a tougher stance towards Russia because they will lose political battle, political game. The same about Kosovo. So it will require more time and efforts. Of course, there should be more efforts from the European Union to present itself as a force which contributes to the development of this country. For example, if you take figures, 59% of the import of Serbia comes from EU, and 68% of the exports goes to the European Union country. But if you ask Serbian people, they will say that the main trade partner is Russia. And part of this, of course, is inability of European Union to present itself as a constructive force. And from other side, it is Russian propaganda which presents Russia as a bigger brother. So I believe that there should be more patience, but also more efforts from EU and some individual member states. But one of the issues was linked to the Corona crisis. I just want to say that it is an opportunity. Of course, it's a huge challenge, but it is also an opportunity for these countries to make their economies more resilient, to restructure their public spendings, and Europe has to help in this. Europe has to help also with the investments. Otherwise, we'll lose this opportunity in these countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask you one more question, very short, and I would like a very short answer. You mentioned several times, and it's very important in this context, you mentioned several times that COVID-19 means also it's a security crisis. And because the COVID-19 will impact the defense and security budgets, but also has implications on unemployment, economic crisis overall. Do you think that especially Western Balkans countries will overcome this crisis?
I hope so, and we will do. I mean, we have to think even further how to get better from this crisis. We'll overcome it. We'll find medical solution. We'll reform our economies. It's understandable. Of course, it will take years probably to get back to the pre-COVID-19 situation, but we'll overcome. Again, the issue is what shall we do to be better, and of course to create more resilient societies. This is a key for me.
Strategic resilience. Thank you very much for all the speakers. It was a great privilege and honor for me having you on this panel. It was very easy having all these generals speaking about security issues and challenges in the Balkans. It was a very easy panel to conduct. And thank you very much for your inputs, for your thoughts. Very interesting ideas. I noted many things. And maybe we have the chance to discuss more in the future conferences and meetings about these interesting issues. I will try to sum up this panel. And Balkan region has historically been a battlefield of power politics. Great powers have been competing for territory and influence, aiming to promote their values, influence the course of events, gain the loyalty of the population, and establish a foothold in the region. The region comprises a patchwork in the sense that different religions and empires have left a mark on its history, which is reflected in a very heterogeneous population, both within and between states. With its rich mix of Orthodox and Catholic churches and Islamic religions, the region as a whole remains European. It was the idea mentioned also by our panelists. Today, a struggle for influence is being waged between the West, namely the European Union, United States and NATO, Russia, and increasingly China, and it was mentioned also some Gulf states, all of which have different strategies and objectives in the region. It is important to note that Turkey has own strategic interests in the Balkans, and it is an increasingly important player here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take now a short break till 14:45. Thank you very much.